Hello, this is Foreign Policy Focus, episode 168. I am the show's host, Kyle. On this show, I'm going to be discussing the nerve agent attack on former Russian double agent Sergei Skripal. It's going to be a little bit of a foreign policy focused true crime podcast because going to really be getting into the evidence and the motives of the possible actors. Of course, everybody in the media seems to be just absolutely speculating wildly that Russia must be the guilty culprit. But I'm going to go over what we actually know and then try to identify who the possible people are that could be behind this attack. So foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com or libertarianinstitute.org to share the show. Also, just got all the episodes of the show up at YouTube, so if you guys want to check that out, the channel is Immersion News, which is the name of my new news website, immersionnews.com. Alright, so let's get into what happened here. On March 4th in the UK, I believe the city is Salisbury, we have Sergei Skripal and his daughter, Yulia, are believed to have been targeted with a nerve agent, and then the first responding officer to these two people was also sickened by the nerve agent. As of the time I'm recording this podcast, which is actually the day before it's released, all three of these people are still alive. And from the way it was reported, it seemed like the police officer who was, I would guess, had been exposed less since he was arriving at the scene later, seems to not be in a life-threatening condition. So obviously everybody turns to the former Russian double agent, right? Because if you have somebody, if this guy has a heart attack in a crowded room of people, a couple people are going to scratch their heads and say, I wonder what happened there. And so because of his, now past life, everybody's going to speculate on his death. However, his death occurring in also a nerve agent attack raises a lot of questions and makes him the suspected target of the attack. His daughter Yulia apparently arrived in the UK from Russia the day before, March 3rd, and then met with her father. Sergei Skripal joined the GRU in 1993. In 1995, he was positioned in, I guess, the former Soviet Republic Estonia, which was then its own independent state and had relations with Western countries, and so was at some point introduced to UK MI5, I believe, or MI6 spy agency member Pablo Miller, who ended up flipping Sergei. It's worth noting that at this time, Pablo Miller's superior at the British spy agency was Christopher Steele, who is, of course, the author of the very infamous Steele dossier that is targeted at Donald Trump. So Sergei continues to give information to the UK up until his arrest for treason in 2004. Obviously, I guess he's guilty of this crime. He was a Russian citizen working for the Russian spy agency and then passing information to the enemy. I guess we could speculate on his motives and to say whether it was moral or not, but as written in the code, this is certainly a crime. In 2006, he's sentenced to 18 years in prison. I guess it's worth noting just the way everybody views Russia as, I still think, a little bit of a Soviet and a lack of a justice state and very cruel. And as the kinds of people that do terrible things, or that would do something terrible, like, expose a man and his daughter to a chemical weapon. Here we have this guy arrested and obviously guilty of the crime of treason, and they sentence him to 18 years in prison, where we have somebody like the new nominee for Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, openly advocating that he believes Edward Snowden should be tried and then given the death penalty for his releasing information on the secret spying program on hundreds of millions of Americans to journalists. In 2010, Sergei is involved in a prisoner exchange where he and three other Russians, who I guess were double agents, were given to Western countries in exchange for 10 Russian sleeper agents who were then given back to Russia. When Sergei moves to the UK, he moves to an area that's close to where Pablo Miller is stationed, and I read some reports that I guess he was friends with Pablo Miller after he came back. I don't know if that suggests that means he was somehow active as a intelligence asset for one side or the other, but I guess it's worth noting that he then went and associated with these people. Although, I mean, it's just as likely that this is for a friendship purpose as well. I mean, we can't for sure say that the reason that Sergei wasn't giving Miller information in the first place was because he didn't see Miller as a friend, and maybe he feels like Miller advocated for him or something to be a part of the prisoner exchange. I don't know. That I could just see possibilities in which this is an actual friendship and not anything to do with any kind of spying or intelligence. It's also worth noting that when we get to 2010, Sergei has now been in the hands of a Russian prison for, I guess, 6 years, and then, was given into the custody of the British government, and so in the hands of the British government for, I don't know how long he spent with them. Either way, he was asked by these intelligence agencies, and you would think as value as an asset, it would be relatively low at this point. Just because I'm sure when he was in captivity in both of those places, he told everybody all there was to tell. And so both sides know, and both sides know the other sides know. As far as I could tell, Sergei lived, I guess, a normal life in that city. They say he didn't seem to have a lot of friends. I think both his wife and his son died in that time. People described him as nice and friendly. And as I said, the only person it seems that has been identified as an associate of Sergei during this time is Pablo Miller. So I guess getting up to March 4th now, his daughter comes to visit. They're sitting on this park bench, and then they're exposed to a nerve agent. This nerve agent has been identified as Novichok, which isn't a particular nerve agent like sarin or Fietz. It's a group of nerve agents that were developed in the Soviet Union starting in the 1970s until the plant was destroyed in 2002 by the United States. So that last detail there is obviously very important. That was destroyed by the United States in 2002. And that's because while the plant was in the former Soviet Union, it was not, however, in Russia. It was in what is now Uzbekistan. So it's worth noting that the Americans at one time also had access to the facility, not just the USSR, and then you would assume that Russia would have at least have most of that intelligence would have been located in Moscow. And so you would assume that now that the Russians would have access to, if not all the chemicals from that facility, they would definitely have the information of those chemicals. Now, as far as it goes, the United States and Russia, and I believe of several other countries, have signed on to a chemical weapons ban where they're supposed to destroy all their chemical weapons. I know that the Russians have actually agreed and have fulfilled their duty according to this treaty in the United States, and I believe the UK so far haven't. Alright, and so now we get to the man who actually was one of the scientists, and I think one of the two main scientists at the facility while it was creating these chemical weapons. The man's name is Vil Mirzanov. I'll go ahead and spell it out for you in case I butchered it. Vilmirzanov. He's a Russian. He's now 86 years old. And like I said, he worked at that facility. He now lives in the United States. I think he came to the United States after the fall of the Soviet Union, and then in 2008 actually published a book with the formulas for the nerve agents that he designed. Now remember, these nerve agents aren't a single nerve agent. It's not like sarin gas, which is a particular chemical. This was a classification of chemical weapons that meant newcomers in English, and basically they were meant to be, I guess, distributed in different ways and overall more potent and more lethal than sarin or Viets. He went ahead and published these formulas in his book, and so when he gave an interview, he said that there's two people who could have possibly done it, Russia and anyone who's read my book. Of course, everybody's kind of focusing on, hey, the guy who designed these chemicals said that Russia is the one who did it, but neglects to say that anybody could go. And I think in the Moon of Alabama article, who does an excellent job of laying all this out, and I'll definitely link to that article in the show notes page, costs only $8 and change. And so it's not like that everybody doesn't have this information. It's just that if you have the facilities to design it in, and this is something that the author points out, is that he's not worried about terrorists getting their hands on this, because this, has to be a facility that I'm sure would cost billions of dollars to construct, and everything has to be just right and just perfect, and you probably have to have a lot of skilled people in order to develop these weapons. Alright, so this is kind of what we have for evidence, and this is what's led us up to the attack and what we know, really. So far, we haven't seen more evidence from the US, the UK, or any other group. When Theresa May and other leaders like Nikki Haley have spoken, they've spoken only of this information that's publicly known. I guess that's not to say that more information may not be known that we don't know, but I mean, that's a hard assumption to make and kind of get yourself in a circle there. I guess just a couple points to make before I get into what the reactions of the world leaders have been is that, like I believe I said in the beginning, that there's two people of interest. It doesn't exactly say that they are believed to be the guilty parties. They may be their witnesses or whatever, but there's two people that are of interest. I believe one was carrying a red bag. As far as I know, these people haven't been captured yet. At least, they're not publicly saying that they're captured. Other things that they haven't discussed is how they were exposed to this, exactly which of the nerve agents that this actually is. They're not saying that there were maybe any flaws to this agent or anything like that, because obviously these were supposed to be worse than sarin or Viet's gas. However, 3 people are exposed to this, and great that nobody died, but that's also has to be kind of an interesting feature of this case, is that 3 people were exposed to what I guess is one of the world's worst chemical weapons that apparently lived. While I'm sure it's extremely likely that the target of this attack was the former Russian double agent, it's not impossible that there weren't other things going on here. I mean, remember, if you go back to the story I was telling of Sergei, he spent 6 years in a Russian prison, he's freed, and then his wife dies and his son dies. And so the point there is just that this man may not have been in a sound state of mind, and certainly his daughter who was with him likewise lost her mother and her brother in the past few years after her father, was a traitor to the motherland, and I'm sure that life hasn't been particularly easy for the daughter of a traitor. And so it seems like there's a lot of, kind of physical and, police work to be done here, that there's a lot of questions left unanswered. And again, it's always possible that they're withholding the evidence for whatever particular reason, but it doesn't seem like they're showing their hands an awful lot to the people that they're supposed to be, representing and looking out for our interest. All right, so post-attack, we have British Prime Minister Theresa May giving a speech claiming that Russia's guilty and pretty much only cites the evidence that I discussed already. And that is, this was a former Russian double agent, and the chemical weapons that were used were designed in the former Soviet Union. That's the evidence that they have. They assess that it's likely Russia. They think that Russia did this, but they're not laying out evidence saying that this nerve agent was developed in this facility in Moscow, and this known Russian, operative was in the UK and dispersed this chemical weapon in this way. We're not getting any of those necessary pieces to draw that conclusion. They're not even saying that we have assets that are telling us that they know that Russia somewhere ordered this attack. Like the whole Russiagate scenario that we have going on in the United States, we're getting an awful lot of this tied into these attacks, where they're able to say Russian in a very vague way. I mean, I guess, is it possible that some former Russian or even current Russian spy just hated this guy a lot for betraying Russia, and he was angry and just wanted to go kill off people who he thinks got away with one? I mean, that's a Russian who did it, but that's far different than Vladimir Putin saying that I want to take this guy out. And there's really no claim or assertion even to at what level within what Russian means when they say that Russia carried out this attack. May eventually gives the Russians 24 hours, I guess, to prove their innocence. Of course, there's the ridiculous notion that you can prove your innocence in the vague way that they use Russian. I'm not sure if they're expecting Vladimir Putin to prevent Theresa May with an alibi for all 100 million Russians within 24 hours. That seems pretty ridiculous, but definitely a strange request to make, and one that seems impossible to provide. Also, you had the idea here that the West is supposed to be better than Russia because we have all these great values like innocent until proven guilty. And here we're assuming the Russians are guilty until they prove themselves innocent. Now, this past weekend, before Rex Tillerson gets the Donald Trump tweet saying you're fired, he says that it seems likely to him that the Russians did it. So we have U.S. Secretary of State saying this. When the ultimatum time expired, Theresa May expelled 23 Russian diplomats from the UK. And so as we saw with the kind of the post-Russiagate stuff, post the 2016 election with Barack Obama, this started to lead very quickly to a spiral between U.S. and Russian relations. And they were really going downhill until, the only thing that the Russiagators have even remotely proved is that Michael Flynn implied to the Russians not to overreact to the Obama sanctions and, dispelling of Russian diplomats and just wait until Trump took charge because, things may normalize a little bit. And that's, far different than the Russians had the elections because at this point in time, Trump is the incumbent. Michael Flynn is designated as the national security advisor of Donald Trump. And so, anyways, that's the situation there. Now to get back into the Sergei nerve gas attack. Nikki Haley at the UN. Nikki Haley is, of course, the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And if you're a long listener to this show, you know she is not somebody I am very fond of. Says that the UN should take action and that the Russians are obviously behind this. We also have Trump, May, Merkel, and Macron, who are, of course, the leaders of the US, UK, Germany, and France, respectively, issuing a statement saying that Russia did it. And that's kind of where we stand today. We'll see as things move forward, what the position of the world leaders take. I think at least for me right now, I feel like it's very hard to know what direction it's going to go. At times, Donald Trump has seemed very sensible on these issues and very willing to not take the direct Russia did it hotline that everybody else seems to absolutely love. The Russians are the longtime villains and very easy to demonize. And of course, they have a large stockpile of nuclear weapons, so they're an easy, people to paint as a threat to the United States and the people of the United States. So hopefully Trump will continue to resist that, but his signing of this thing that said Russia did it certainly seems to suggest that's not the case. That's not to say that Russia, I guess, didn't do it and it wasn't ordered by Vladimir Putin or somebody within the Russian government. It's possible that Donald Trump has intelligence that the rest of us don't have and that the UK is withholding some kind of evidence at this point for whatever reason. But at least with the information that we're being given, the actions and the condemnations of Russia are absolutely unjustified and absolutely unfounded. I think that's most important when you look at the people talking in the mainstream media. They should at least be bringing attention to the fact with the knowledge that they have, they can't condemn Russia, yet they're condemning Russia anyways. I guess it's worth talking about the motives right here and just kind of going over why people think Russia or Vladimir Putin are behind this attack. I guess the first thing and the most obvious thing is this would be an act of retribution, right? Is that Vladimir Putin loves his motherland and will do anything to defend it. And this is somebody who defiled her by trading to the enemy. And now he's living a good life in the UK. And Vladimir Putin's going to show him by killing him and his daughter together. I find this to be kind of unlikely. Just because at least I would hope that a world leader would have more restraint. I think in other cases, such as the shoot down of the Russian jet by Turkey, we've seen Vladimir Putin hold an awful lot of restraint and not be somebody very quick to act. I, of course, find it very interesting that you have people suggesting, on one hand, that Vladimir Putin is this very, vindictive man who acts in retribution recklessly. And then at the same time saying that he played the long game, cultivating Donald Trump into a Russian asset and making him from reality TV host to president of the United States. I guess there's the possibility that this is a little bit more of a calculated move by Vladimir Putin, and he was maybe trying to send a message to Russians who would think about betraying the homeland and to say, this is what will happen to you if you go against us. I guess the other possibility is we did just have Vladimir Putin announce a lot of very large nuclear capabilities that are able to bypass the defenses of the United States of America. And so maybe this is Vladimir Putin trying to flex his muscles. Again, it seems short-sighted in that this is going to have a lot of negative for the Russians. I mean, the West is obviously going to pursue sanctions against them. I'm guessing that a lot of Russian oligarchs and a lot of rich Russians or Russians involved with the Russian government are going to be hit with individual sanctions. And so if Vladimir Putin did act this recklessly, it may cause some dislike for Vladimir Putin among some of the elites in Russia. It would at least I would hope from like everybody's perspective, they would say, well, it seems awfully stupid to use a chemical weapon developed by the USSR. Let's use one that's well known and well used even by terrorists around the world to at least give us some distance from this attack. I think from the perspective of the Russians, if you're trying to just send a message to the other agents, you could do that by killing this guy in any way that's an obvious murder. It doesn't necessarily have to be one that traces right back to the Kremlin. I think more obvious, there's a lot of motives and a lot of things that suggest that Russia would have a motive not to do this, and especially not to do it in such an obvious way. Generally, people who commit crimes don't want to have it traced right back to them. And so using this weapon traces it right back to Russia and allows everybody to immediately point the finger at Russia. You also have the fact that this guy was at least seemingly kind of taken off the board here. He had been in a Russian prison for 6 years. He was traded to the UK and was given to UK intelligence. It's not like he was holding on to any secrets that people didn't already know. I mean, it doesn't seem like there would be maybe an intelligence reason at all for Russia to kill this guy. And as Justin Raimondo points out in his article, that I will also link to on the show notes page, which has tons of great information in it, there's been a long-standing agreement between Western countries and Russia or the USSR to not kill off the spies that I guess don't have any more intelligence, and not to kill off spies that have been traded in these deals like this man was, because then it kind of negates the point of trading if you just kill them once they get over there. When you accuse Russia of doing it, I guess it depends on how vaguely you mean that. It's possible that this was a non-state actor, but a Russian person going to kill this guy. Maybe he felt personally like he was exposed. Who knows what kind of secrets this guy gave up. Maybe he gave up a secret that led to the capture of a Russian agent. That Russian agent has a son, a father, a brother, a friend, a co-worker who decides later on to get retribution against these guys. And I'm not saying that happened, but there's all these unlikely narratives that all seem unlikely, but also could be responsible for this. And so to say that Russia did it, you could mean that kind of very vaguely. And yeah, it could mean that a Russian did this, but that doesn't necessarily mean acting out of the Russian government. It could also be somebody looking to sow discord between the United States and Russia. If you are, I don't know, there's terrible actors all over the world who would do terrible things. And so if this weapon did fall into their hands, this guy's a perfect target. He's likely unsuspecting of it because he's, just kind of an old man going about his routine now. Nobody would think that he was a threat. And so you could pretty easily hit him with the gas. And then everybody immediately turns and points their fingers at Russia and you get away free. And so, I guess we'll have to see what happens as the evidence comes out. But the very important thing here is don't condemn Russia too quickly, because if Russia wasn't behind this attack and they're condemned, this is needlessly getting in the way of much needed diplomacy. And it's also provoking confrontation between the world's two largest nuclear superpowers, which is already being provoked unnecessarily in places like Syria. Nikki Haley at the UN saying that if the UN doesn't act on East Ghouta, the United States will, implying a military strike against Assad. Of course, we've already had reports out of the White House, or out of the Washington Post, saying that the White House is considering another military strike against the Assad government. Russia has said that they will respond and I guess, respond to the American attack on Assad, maybe implying shooting down Russian planes or attacking U.S. forces stationed in Syria. As I briefly mentioned, we also have Ukraine looking to join NATO. They're looking for, I guess, like a plan of action plan for their membership. This is like the first significant step to getting into NATO. And so there's a lot of tensions with Russia already. And if this turns out not to have been a Russian attack and everybody is just demonizing the Russians for it, it's going to lead to awful more problems with a country with an awful lot of nuclear weapons. And also a country who says that they're going to assert themselves more in regional conflict like in Syria, and possibly like whatever happens in the Ukrainian civil war. If if, of course, the Ukraine government goes ahead and tries to join NATO. All right, that's where I'll wrap up the show for today. I hope you all liked it. foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, libertarianinstitute.org, at KYAAALE on Twitter. Kyle's Files is the Facebook page. immersionnews.com is the brand new news website. And I have the private Facebook group, Foreign Policy Focus.